Before we get into this week's episode, I have a very special announcement I'd like to share with you all. As my valued listeners, I wanted you to be the first to know about the inaugural Women and Wealth Catalyst Summit that I'll be hosting in 2025. I hope you'll join me and some other amazing women on March 27th at the Golden Gate Club in San Francisco for a full day of impactful sessions, including fireside conversations, intimate panels, and engaging discussions with values-aligned partners. Do not miss this opportunity to ignite your path to financial success and become part of a supportive network committed to achieving wealth. Reserve your spot today at women.win. That's right, ladies, women.win. And join us for a day that will shape your financial future. If you can't join us in San Francisco, be sure to stay tuned for New York City dates and venues soon to be announced. I can't wait to see you all there.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together.
Cindy Gallop is someone who requires very little introduction, but in today's episode of Getting Rich Together, we are given an incredible opportunity to hear her wisdom and what it's been like for her to grow up in this world, not only rising up in the ranks of advertising, which she's been able to do globally and very prolifically, but also in her roles as the founder and CEO of Make Love Not Porn, holding a number of board advisor roles, and also at the helm of If We Ran the World. I am so excited for everyone to hear this conversation between me and Cindy as she talks about what it was like to build wealth as a young person and what it's been like to invest and double down in her startup. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Cindy, I am so excited to have you here today, not just to talk about your incredible career, but to talk to you about money.
Terrific. Thrilled to be here.
Well, I'd love to start with life as a young girl, a young Cindy, somewhere between the ages of 5 and 12 years old. What was money like for you? Where were you? What were some of your experiences?
Sure. So my father was English. My mother is Chinese, Malaysian Chinese. And I was born in the UK. When I was 6, we moved to Brunei in Borneo, where my father got a job. And my parents are both teachers. And growing up, my family was poor. And my mother, being Chinese, is incredibly thrifty, which was wonderful, but not so wonderful when you are a child growing up without the ability to, spend money on things that, other children might be. It's funny because one of my enduring memories of my childhood is, we would travel for vacations around England. And we would always, eat in the cheapest places, hawker stalls. We would stay in rest houses, as they were called, around Asia. One of my enduring memories is that this happened on a regular basis. My mother and my father and I and my 3 sisters would file into a restaurant somewhere in Indonesia or Hong Kong or wherever. And we would sit down. They'd have found a big table for us, a family of 6. The waiter would bring the menus. My mother would study them. She would decide the restaurant was too expensive, and we would all get up and file out again. And when you're a child, that is mortifying. And I bring this up, Charlotte, because, actually, my mother, and father, gave all of us very good advice about saving and all of that. But the fact of the matter is that that sort of upbringing can go one of 2 ways. And in my case, when I went out into the world and was employed and began earning money, I had a reaction to that, which was to spend that money on nice things because that had not been, what I grew up with. The thing I will say my parents absolutely dinned into us, and to the extent that I have regularly repeated this advice to people ever since, is my mother, being Chinese, was very much about investing her money in things she could actually touch. Bricks and mortar, property. And so my sisters and I were all told, as soon as you can, when you have your first job, when you're earning money, as soon as you can, get your foot on the property. And actually, that was phenomenal advice. And by the way, I'm obviously going to be talking about getting a foot on the property ladder a very long time ago. So I apologize in advance to our listeners for the outrageously low cost of apartments I'm about to cite. But I began my career in theatre where, I earned chicken feed, basically. I eventually got fed up with working 24/7, earning, virtually nothing. And at the time that I began getting tired of this, I was the publicity officer for the Everman Theatre in Liverpool. And part of my job promoting the theatre was giving talks. So I gave a talk to a group of women. And afterwards, one of them came up to me and said, "Young lady, you could sell a fridge to an Eskimo." And I thought, that's the universe telling me something. Time to sell out and go into advertising. And so I did. So I joined the advertising industry as an entry-level recruit in 1985 in London. And in 1987, I moved to my second agency and I was earning just about enough I could scrape together a mortgage. And then the issue became that I couldn't find anything affordable in the apartment in the familiar areas of London. And a friend of mine at the agency said, come to Southeast London. It's really affordable. I live in Nunhead. And I'm going, where's Nunhead? I've never been to Southeast London. But anyway, my father and I trekked to an area of London in the Southeast called Peckham, which at the time was very not the place to live, and therefore affordable. And I found a great one-bedroom apartment looking out on Peckham Rye Common with a view of grass and trees. And I bought that for the princely sum of £41,500, which would be the equivalent of about, $60,000 today. Once I'd paid the mortgage, I had no money left over from my, lonely figure in advertising career. But very usefully, on the other side of the common from me was a big old house clearer auctioneer's warehouse. And so I bought all of my furniture dirt cheap from this clearance place, all secondhand and antique. And actually, I still have pieces in my apartment to this day because I love, antique furniture and old things. So that was how I was able to furnish an apartment. But that made a huge difference. Actually, buying an apartment in a very far-flung area for a rock bottom. Because when I came to sell it, I remember at the time, this was about 4 years, and the UK was going through a recession at the time. And I had a broker come round to value my apartment before I put it on them. And he looked around him and he went, Miss Gallop, I'm really sorry to have to tell you that I think, the most you can get for them is £56,000. And I went, what do you mean? And he went, what do you mean? And I went, I only paid £41,500 for it. And he was shocked. He said, you are the only person I've spoken to, in the past few months who is not underwater with her mortgage right now. So basically, Shama, that is what enabled me to be able to, to keep buying home. And I know that we live in very different times today, but especially for women, that continues to be, a thing I'm eternally grateful to my parents. And a key I was like, which is, find the undesirable area, and find the affordable apartment and just, get your foot on that ladder. And by the way, the enormous irony is that a few years ago, the Evening Standard, a newspaper in London, ran a list of, the coolest neighborhoods in London, and Peckham was number one. So you totally get there in the end. I should have kept that apartment.
That is so amazing, Cindy. And how old were you when you bought your very first apartment?
I was 27.
Wow, what a big deal for such a young person to take on this responsibility. At that age, people don't typically make very much money. And usually you're looking to spend money at the restaurants or going out with friends. How did you manage to cover this mortgage early on in your career? What were some of the decisions that you had to make?
In those early years, everything was going to the mortgage. It's funny because I remember, there are always things in life one wishes one had bought that one didn't. And I mentioned the house clearance warehouse, and there was a pair of beautiful Art Deco leather armchairs that were £400 for the pair. And I couldn't afford that back in the day. And I wish to God I'd not eaten for a month and bought them. Because, there are those things that stay in your head, but £400 was just not viable at the time at all. And I mean, I can literally, I can remember the price, I can remember the armchairs. So things were very tight for a while, but then I began moving up the ad industry career ladder and earning more, and had the opportunity to kind of trade up on the apartment front as well, which was terrific. And then really got into the enjoying life scenario, which, as I said, was a bit of a backlash against, a sort of restricted childhood and a couple of things on that. I mean, first of all, and obviously we're having this conversation with the benefit of hindsight, but, I absolutely endorse now my mother's emphasis on saving, because I didn't save enough, and if when you are that age, you don't think longer term. But I have friends who very early on, thought about what would happen when they retired and began putting money away. And, the miracle of compound interest is that, you end up in a very, very good position in several decades' time, which, for most of us when we are in our 20s, is not how you're thinking, unfortunately. So that's something that I wish I'd really taken on board much more in my younger years. The other thing I would say is I'm interviewed regularly about my career, and a question I get regularly is, do you have any regrets? Is anything you regret? And I really have no regrets, but the one thing I do wish I had done was I wish I'd started working for myself a damn sight sooner. I'm 64, and my generation was a generation that was told what you do is you go to a good university, you get a good degree, you get a good job. The whole concept of entrepreneurialism was not a thing at all, and, working for yourself, first of all, is the only way to be. But secondly, that is the path to wealth creation as well. When you can build something and maybe sell it or exit it and go on to build something else, or you can build something that makes you money, as opposed to working hard to make money for other people. And obviously the good news there is that entrepreneurialism is now a thing. People are encouraged to start their own businesses. But, that is one thing that, I wish I'd been in a culture where that was considered.
So you had a really incredible career at BBH and rose up through the ranks rather quickly. What was it like for you on your personal finances as you started to create and generate more wealth?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm a ferocious negotiator, and that also is something that I've really looked to pass on to as many women as possible in my speaking and coaching and so on. That I absolutely have to thank my mother for again, because being Chinese, it was all about bargaining. You never took the first price, you forced them down, you walked away, et cetera, et cetera. So I did take that on board. And I remember the very first time that I ever negotiated my pay review. So this was my third agency in London, which was the one before BBH. And, a couple of things about that. The first is I decided, right, I've been at this agency for, I think it was a year, my first performance pay review. And I thought, right, I want to make sure I get more money because my salary was still pretty low. And knowledge is power. And so I need to know what other people at my level are earning. So I basically went round the agency and I asked them. And they were all British. Okay. They were so shocked, they told me. So, that was power. So, and again, I really encourage people to, in this situation, absolutely ask people what. Just go right ahead, but obviously today there is much more of a movement around salary transparency and how we can help each other by being open. And especially, by the way, I've seen some wonderful male allies be open about what they're earning to help women, which is phenomenal. So, I decided the raise I wanted, but I decided what I wanted. And so I went into this performance, which was conducted by my immediate boss, who was the head of account manager. And they gave me a rave review. I've been doing very well. And then they told me what my pay raise was. And it was, I remember this, it was £1,000 short of where I wanted it. And so I thought, right, I've got to negotiate. And this was the first time I'd ever done this. And I was so fearful. I remember thinking, okay, Cindy, just start talking. You don't know what's going to come out, but you've got to say something. So I began talking, and my voice sounded very small and very far away. But I basically got out why I felt I deserved £1,000 more. And the two men looked at each other, and Jim, the MD, said, okay, Cindy, wait outside in the corridor. So I went outside, they shut the office, and a few minutes later, they called me back in and they gave it to me. And I went, wow, this negotiating shit is fantastic. I left this agency, I joined BBH. And I joined BBH on the same salary that I was earning at GE, because at the time, this is 1989 in London, BBH was the hottest agency in town. They could totally afford to say, we're going to pay you the same salary you were on, but we're going to give you a pay review in 6 months' time. The 6-month point arrived, and I had my pay review schedule. And, by now I was all about negotiating. So I went, right, I decided what the figure I wanted was. And again, I can't remember the actual numbers, but I decided I wanted a £5,000 pay rate. And I went, but they're not going to give me that. So I'll settle. So I rehearsed my arguments. Okay. On the day I turned up outside the office of my immediate boss, the head of account manager, in my head was, right, 1.5, settle for 3. 1.5, settle for 3. Don't forget that, because I knew perfectly well I'd get very unnerved when I went to this session, So I'm sitting there and my boss has given me this rave review, a really, really terrific. And all the time my head's going, 1.5, settle for 3. 1.5, settle for 3. So we get to the key bit where he goes, okay, Cindy, it was a terrific review. And based on this, we're going to give you a pay raise of £6,000. And I was so gobsmacked, I couldn't say a word. Okay. And so I just sat there and I looked at him, and he thought I was really unhappy about how low that was. And he went, but of course, we'll give you another review in 6 months' time, and if you're doing really well, I'm sure I could. So, ever since then, I've got negotiate.
How incredible that you got more money than you even thought you were going to. I mean, talk about the universe really opening up for you and saying, Cindy, you have rehearsed this so many times. We're going to give you a little extra bonus than what you thought you were going to get. I just love that so much. So now looking at your time and tenure at BBH, you definitely have a legacy career, a career where you created a lot of impact and were able to open up markets and take on these leadership roles. And then you decided to take this turn towards entrepreneurship. Now, to me, it sounds like you had a really safe career. I know often with immigrant parents, as I do, having that safe and secure career is really important. I remember when I was younger, my mom would tell me, hey, stay at that job because it's going to take care of you for a long time. So how did you start to navigate, and what were some of the dominoes that fell that led you towards the path of entrepreneurship?
Thing is, Charlotte, honestly, everything in my life and career has happened by accident. I have never consciously intentionally planned anything. My ex-boss at BBH, John Hegarty, has this wonderful mantra, do interesting things and interesting things will. And that's pretty much what my life has been. So, I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. Again, it wasn't something that I was consciously thinking of because I had not been brought up with that mindset. And obviously, when you're in the corporate world, you're not really, thinking about that either. The reason I left the corporate world because in 2005, I turned 45. I had my very own personal midlife crisis in the sense that I'd always thought of 45 as kind of a midlife point. Obviously, by the way, in the happy assumption one lives to be 90, fingers crossed. But in the couple of years running up to it, I'd gone, on one's 45th birthday is the moment when you should pause, take stock, reflect and view, where have I been, where am I going? And so I duly did that on February 1, 2005. And that was the point at which I went, oh my God, I've just worked 16 years for the same advertiser. And, BBH is a wonderful, love them to death, cannot say enough nice things about them. I'd worked for them in London, Singapore. They'd simply do my dream job, starting up BBH US, here in New York. But I went, oh my God, I think it might be time to do something different. And then the problem was I hadn't the faintest idea what. Because, I'd said to people, I don't intend to work in advertising forever. But advertising is a very useful industry to find out what you want to do next, because you come into contact with so many different industry sectors, companies, people. I'd always thought that one day my next big thing would bubble up from the ether. And then I was at the age of 45 and it hadn't. So vast amounts of thought and acting ensued. And eventually I went, if I want to review every possible option openly for what is effectively the second fourth of my life, maybe the best thing to do is to put myself on the mid very publicly and go, okay, guys, here I am. What do you got? And see what comes. So I took a massive leap into the unknown. I resigned as chairman of BBH New York in the summer of 2005 without a job to go to. And it was honestly the best bloody thing that I ever did. And first of all, the reason I knew I was able to was a bit of a double-edged sword, actually, because BBH is such a wonderful agency that there were many people like me at the top of it who had no intention of going anywhere. You know, one of the reasons for jumping ship was, I mean, at the time, I was one of the larger shareholders in the company, but my stake was tiny. You know, BB&H didn't plan equity from the beginning in the way they should have because they had no idea back then how successful they would one day. You know, so the partners held the majority of share. And you couldn't increase your shareholding unless somebody left or died, and nobody was doing either. So I knew if I stayed on, I was never going to make me rich. But the good thing about that was that because it was a private company, when you left, you had to sell your shares back. So I knew I'd have a cushion in the immediate short term to be able to explore, you know, what I want to do. And the reason I say it was the best thing I ever did was, you know, I go back to my point about entrepreneurialism. You know, I am now evangelical about working. Too many people make the mistake of thinking that a job is the safe option. It's not. Because in a job, you are at the mercy of management changes, industry downturn, marketplace dynamics. I say to people, whose hands would you rather place your future in? There's the large corporate entity who at the end of the day doesn't give a shit about you, or somebody who will always have your best interests at heart, i.e. you.
Wow, what a realization to have at that time, driven by yourself. I mean, so many people only in the last few years during the pandemic really stopped to ask themselves about what is truly security? What is it truly that's going to make me happy in this world? Didn't really have an opportunity until then to sort of stop and say, let me extract myself from this situation, start to look reflective. It's so courageous to take a left turn when the path forward seems so easy and so clear. And also what a gift to be able to cash in those shares and provide yourself a cushion. So here you are on your own, probably in an apartment that you own. So you have some shelter, you have some savings, you have this inflow of cash that's coming in, and yet the future is feeling still uncertain. How are you managing the emotional components of an uncertain future and cash, but cash that's probably going to be eaten away at because of your life expenses?
Sure. Well, obviously, I began working as a consultant and a public speaker to support myself while I was deciding and I've continued to do that ever since. But I'll tell you what I especially regret. And again, Shoma, this is to do with how much as women we are not trained and encouraged to think like this. So, you know, I became an entrepreneur by accident. You know, so I was working in tech back in the early 2000s. And I found myself moving in circles of Silicon Valley tech players. Very early on, I met a lot of people just when they were starting what are now very big public companies. And there are a couple of things to that. So obviously, in the whole tech world and the business world generally, there was a closed loop of white guys talking to white guys about other white. And I know, you know, looking back, that within those closed loop of white guys around me, there were absolutely conversations going that were, hey, listen, I've had a good tip on, you know, this company. They're doing a friends and family round. I can get you in for 10,000. Okay. And that friends and family round was for Uber or whatever. And women don't do that, or historically have not done that because they have not had access to, because again, there's a closed loop. And nevertheless, I was actually hanging out with guys at Web Summit and I kick myself now because I wish I'd said back in the day, could I put a small amount of money into what you're building? But I was not thinking. They all were, but I was not. But secondly, you know, that's why I say to women these days, if you have a hot tip on something that you think is a pretty good bet that will take a small investment, share that with me. You know, do the white guy whisper network with women. Because even today, that still doesn't. And by the way, it doesn't happen even with the women who are professional investors who could do this. if you have something that you think has the opportunity to go public in a relatively short space of time, whatever, bring other women on for the minimum that they could get in there, because that's how you help create. So I kicked myself back in the day. Oh, the other thing I kicked myself about is, so by sharing all my benefit of hindsight mistakes, our listeners know not to make them. But I ended up starting Make Love Not Porn by accident. I was dating younger men. I realized before anybody else did that porn was becoming sex education and not a good, launched a little side venture 15 years ago that was effectively a public service announcement, Porn World versus Real World. Gave a TED talk, the entire world responded, realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue and turned into a business designed to do good and make money simultaneously. And instantly, when I began building this venture, discovered that I was going to have to fight a battle every single day to build it. Basically, because every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup takes for granted. At Make Love Not Porn, we can't, because the small print always says no adult content. And that's all based across every area of the business. Can't get funded, couldn't get banked, can't put payments in place, tech services won't work with you, banned from advertising, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of my biggest business growth inhibitors was, as I mentioned, payment. PayPal won't work with them, Stripe won't, maintain credit card process. And so I began very early on, 11, 12 years ago, talking to the Bitcoin. And that makes it very easy to answer another question I regularly ask in interviews, which is, Cindy, what was your biggest business mistake? Not buying Bitcoin 12 years ago. Although I reassure myself, Charlotte, by going, had I bought Bitcoin 12 years ago, I would undoubtedly have been one of those people who lost the key. I'd be sitting on $200 million completely inaccessible. I like to cheer myself up by thinking that. And by the way, the reason I didn't get into Bitcoin personally was because, I was bootstrapping Make Love Not Porn, and all those years ago, there were no plug and play options. I was obviously looking at Bitcoin from the point of view of, can we take payments and make payouts? But I had no developer. I didn't have the resources and the funds to build the interface that would enable me to integrate with what was there then. So that's why I didn't take it further then, but obviously why I also kicked myself for not buying Bitcoin.
Well, I think we all could have done well investing in Bitcoin 12 years ago. Now, Cindy, you've done so much in terms of really creating different revenue streams, and not just with Make Love Not Porn, but all the different ways in which you are out there in the world, like speaking and how you are out there evangelizing women.
So I happened to start a business that is right out there on the final frontier of investment and business services that is enormously challenging to operate. And, as the saying goes, the path that I didn't choose this path, it chose me. And the world responded. And so I had to follow it. And that's been enormously worthwhile, because every day people write to us at Make Love Not and tell us how we've changed their lives. As a unique business, we have a unique capability. We have the power to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior for them in a way that nuts can. And that's extraordinary. But what that means is, first of all, as I know you all know, but for our listeners' information, female founders have enormous trouble getting funded. Last year, only 1.7% of capital went to female founders. I represent the triple whammy of unfundability. I'm female, I'm older, and have a sex tape. And by the way, I actually represent the quadruple whammy of unfundability, because I'm also a woman of color. But I'm white passing, so I don't include that. What that means is that, I have one wonderful angel in Make Love. I pitched the idea for 2 years from 2009 to 2000, because that's how long it took me to find one person who got it, put up seed funding, and has been very supportive ever since, and has put in the majority of funding. But I basically put all my savings in to keep it going over the years. I put everything I earn, consulting and speaking, into the business. I have destroyed myself financially. And I would say to female founders, on balance, don't do that. But many, many female founders do, because we know we have a viable business. And by the way, if at any point over the past 11 years, I'd thought I built something nobody wants, I would absolutely walk away, but I haven't. I've built something the world desperately needs. I hear that every day. And the world desperately needs more and more as the original huge social issue I created it to solve just gets worse every day as well. And I have a lot of people who have faith in me and know that Make Love Not Porn and its sex education offshoots need to exist. And so for me, it's been worthwhile, but I have absolutely destroyed myself financially for this business, which, by the way, means I've got to make it pay back. So that's very good motivation as well. But I bring that up, Sean, because that is true of many female founders, including a number who are very good personal friends who have absolutely put themselves in financial jeopardy because they have a business that absolutely has a market, has an opportunity, and they cannot get funded. And that's a huge problem.
Yes, it is so disheartening and frustrating to see so many incredible business ideas founded by women not receiving the funding that they deserve in order to be able to catapult these businesses to make change in the world and to create new enterprise. And I've been seeing this also on the venture funding side, to see female VCs out there for years trying to close small venture funds is also extremely disheartening. It's almost as if we need a whole new educational platform and system to be able to connect the dots better, or to be able to destigmatize or help educate that all businesses should be looked at from this lens of opportunity to create strong value propositions for profitability and for change, and not just through sort of a gender biased lens where you see a lot of men investing in businesses of what they look like, and being able to really be able to look beyond themselves to see new opportunities.
And I want to pick up on that, Sean, because I think it's really important our listeners understand what is at stake when women don't get funded. And I want to use my own example of what I felt, and I want to contextualize it in the broader tech landscape because the young white male founders of the giant tech platforms that dominate all our lives today, they are not the primary target, online or offline, of harassment, abuse, sexual assault, racism, violence, rape, revenge porn. Therefore, they did not and they do not proactively design for the prevention of any of those things on their platform. And we see the results of that around us every single day. Those of us who are most at risk every single day, women, Black people of color, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, we design safe spaces and safe experiences, but we don't get funded, which is why we have never seen how much better the future of the internet could be when it's designed and built with a female lens at scale. I designed Make Love Not Porn to be the safest place on the internet because I designed it around what everybody else should have, nobody else did, human curation. There is no self-publishing of anything on Make Love. Our curators watch every frame of every video from beginning to end before we approve or reject and republish it. No one else does that. We review every post on every member profile. And by the way, on Make Love Not Porn, those posts can be as safe work or not safe work as you like, but we review them. We approve or reject and we publish them. No one else does. We review every comment on every video before we approve or reject and publish it. No one else does that. We can vouch for every single piece of content on our platform in a way that no. And the key thing here, Sharma, is that we're tiny bootstrapping, have no money, and we've human curated everything for 11 years. Imagine what Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat could do with their billions if they chose to. Safety on the internet is not a matter of viability, it's a matter of will. The enormous irony is that if they implemented our human curation pre-publishing model, those gigantic platforms would actually make way more money than they are doing right now. And there are two reasons. The first is because obviously they think it's completely unviable and costly and expensive. The first reason is the moment you announce to the world that you are human curating everything pre-publishing, you instantly turn off the fire hose of Nazis, racists, child abusers. The moment you implement that model, you lose the shit because they know they can't upload it anymore because they won't get through. So it becomes way more manageable. But the second reason why when you implement this model, you will make far more money than you are currently making, even than you are currently making, is two little words: brand safety. When you can guarantee to advertise that their ads will never, ever run next to content they wouldn't want to run next, you quadruple your advertising.
I just love that point of view on protecting the brand and creating more wealth, strengthening society, and creating really opportunities to create a regenerative environment, especially as we look at how women get taken down and this need for us to be able to take a very human approach on things. The algorithms don't cut it. They don't have our best interest at heart. And I do believe that we are starting to see more and more information coming out to really support that positioning, Cindy. Now, as we look at sort of money today for you and what money means, what are some of the ways in which it's changed over time and how are you currently relating to it?
No, it's absolutely changed. And, for the past decade, I have been exhorting women to unashamedly set out to make an absolute goddamn fucking shit ton.
Yes.
And I explained that I deliberately articulated in those precise words because that is how much money I want all of us to make. And I made the point that I want us all to make an absolute goddamn fucking shit ton of money because separate to the benefit to us, when we make that kind of money, we can fund other women. We can support others. We can help other women. We can donate to others. We need to build our own financial ecosystem because the white male one is not working. And so I, for many years, as I say, I've been very focused on specifically talking to women, and especially because I don't see other people. I like to find key nodes where you can make things happen, where the impact is disproportionate to kind of the pressure you're exerting. And, many years ago, I spoke at a conference in Dublin, Inspirefest, which was set up as a reaction to very white male-dominated websites. So Inspirefest was an amazingly diverse lineup of speakers. And again, this is years ago, but it was focused on the tech community and on the problems that female founders face, raising funding and generally. And I was one of the final speakers. And I came up on stage and I said to the audience, we spent the past 2 days talking about all of the challenges we all face. You have no idea how magically those challenges, how they will melt away instantly. We have to prove we can make an absolute goddamn fucking shit ton of money. And then investors' mindsets shift, LPs' mindsets shift, then attitudes towards us change. But honestly, that's the quickest way to do it.
Oh, I just love that so much, Cindy. So how is it that you are looking to create the future? How is it that you are looking to impact your family? What is it that they see? You obviously have been able to impact millions of people globally, your messaging, with your education, with how you inspire. But what does your family think about everything? What do they know that's going on in Cindy's life today?
All of my family know that I'm doing a very good thing, and it's entertaining because, as I mentioned, my mother's Chinese. She was one of 10 brothers and sisters. So I have a vast number of Chinese cousins around the world. And I connect with, a number of them whenever I can. And one of them actually lives here in New York. And in the past, when I've gone together with them, they've said our parents, or my aunts and uncles, never talk about what you do, but we all do, and we think it's amazing. So first of all, my family knows that I'm doing something very much needed and very worthwhile, however uncomfortable it makes them. And secondly, I do get asked this question about what your parents think. And my father passed away, but my response is always, my mother's Chinese. The day Make Love Not Porn makes an absolute goddamn fucking shit ton of money is the day she's just fine.
Well, Cindy, I love that. I think that's so great. I would love to ask you, what is it that we can do as an audience to support, evangelize, and help make this vision of your world a reality?
Well, what I would absolutely love our listeners to do is we have just launched our first ever equity crowdfunding campaign for Make Love Not Porn on WeFund. And the reason it's our first ever equity crowdfunding campaign is because, per my points earlier, no crowdfunding platform previously would touch us. The only reason we've been able to launch because it's being led by the wonderful Jamila Jamil, the actress from The Good Place, She-Hulk. She has a fantastic community called iWay, and she interviewed me for her iWay podcast of the year before last. And she's a huge fan of Make Love Not Porn. And at the same time, she wants to encourage her iWay community to fund female founders. And so because of her, the fact she was leading this, we funder embraced her when no other crowdfunding platform would. And so we launched our campaign just last month. We're targeting $1 million if we can get there. We have raised, I think it's just as of today, $260,000. And so I would love our listeners to please go to wefunder.com/makelovenotporn and please micro-invest. The minimum investment is $100. So, it starts slow. Obviously, anybody able to put in more than that, please do. I am enormously moved by the fact that when you invest, you can send messages about why you're investing. And there are so many lovely people who believe in me, believe in what we're doing. And my commitment is that I'm going to do my absolute damnedest to add several zeros to whatever in investments. And so that would just be wonderful. Everybody listening, if every one of you can just go to WeFunder and put the minimum, or a bit more into micro-invest and Make Love Not Porn, I would be so grateful. What that funding will enable us to do is to finally build the 0 to 18 and beyond sex education expansion of Make Love Not Porn, makelovenotporn.academy. If you go to that URL, you'll see my vision laid out. This is something parents and teachers have been begging me for years. Okay, there's a huge need. It's what I characterize as the Khan Academy of sex education. Because Khan Academy tutors on every other topic under the sun except this one. Educational technology, EdTech, is exploding, not in this area. Sex education is being blocked and censored on social platforms. There's a huge need for makelovenotporn.academy. I would love you to help fund it. And honestly, it is a very good investment.
It's so fascinating because industries like the pharmaceutical companies, they do so much to get children and young adults hooked on drugs and all sorts of things. But when it comes to things like sexual education, developing consciousness and awareness, somehow that has to be a grassroots movement and isn't something that isn't endorsed, which to me is just mind-boggling. Well, Cindy Gallop, you are an incredible leader, a force in this world. I want to thank you deeply for spending your time, your generosity of spirit, unpacking your life and your vision for the world. I'm grateful to have you on today's show. Thank you for being here.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Sharma. And, the dialogues that you are providing to the world with this podcast is just enormous. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.